I'm going to share screen now, or attempt to do so, and just introduce. Some of you will know the Three Horizons framework, others less so. I just want to quickly run through it one more time so that we're literally on the same page. And I know that we're able to share this presentation afterwards, so no need to take any notes. It's a very simple framework. It looks at three perspectives, as it says there, three perspectives on the future potential of the present moment. It's very easy to see three horizons as short, medium, and long-term versions of the present. Actually, there are three perspectives on what we can see from here in the present. There's always, let me see if I can get over here. There we go. Oh, hold on. There we go. So there's always a first horizon, a dominant pattern, a business as usual system in wherever we look. There's a way that things are done. It's the thing that we rely on. It's dominant. Nothing lasts forever, and so there's a kind of sense that over time it loses its strategic fit. And this is the kind of view of the future that we see if we're the manager. It's a kind of managerial perspective. I've got a system that people rely on, and I've got to keep it running. Because it doesn't last forever, and if we do, or if at least we last long enough to outlive our present first horizon, there will be another pattern of activity that becomes dominant. We call that the third horizon, the future pattern. The way that things will eventually evolve into the future. It's pretty small in the present. It tends to be developed and embodied and enacted in the present by some visionaries who can see a different way of doing things and are going about it now. And so we see a different pattern come through over time, the third horizon. And then there's a second horizon, which is a kind of zone of innovation that connects the two, a zone of transition. And here we get entrepreneurial activity, people changing things, trying new stuff, because they can see the first horizon failing and they can see the third horizon beginning to provide hope of a different future. And that gives you this distinction between sustaining innovation, the kind of innovation that keeps the old pattern going, keeps it, gets it more efficient and saves it money or whatever, keeps it going a bit longer, and transformative innovation that feeds that emerging new pattern that fits the future better. And that's what we get out of the Three Horizons framework. And there are a couple of Bill Sharp, who wrote the book on Three Horizons, The Patterning of Hope. He talks about it encouraging three perspectives or three practices. One is the capacity to convene the future, he calls it. In other words, if you get a bunch of people together and ask them what they see, how they see the future in those three different patterns, you can have a very interesting conversation. People do tend to look at, when you ask them about the future, they have concerns, they have worries that effectively that the first horizon is going to fail them. They have good ideas, they see things that are interesting or exciting or curious, that kind of entrepreneurial second horizon, and they have visions and hopes of their own for how the future might turn out. And if you convene people together, you can have a conversation about that. The second practice that Bill talks about is seeing in patterns. That once you see those, what people are observing, you can start to weave those together and see patterns in what they're seeing. And the third practice is to put ourselves in the picture, that those hopes and aspirations are our own. And again, if we convene groups of people, we get a sense of what we are collectively aspiring to. So I just want to show, a few ways now of convening those conversations. This is probably the simplest. There we are. I call this the 5-box template. Very easy. Get the group together and go through the parts of the map in this order. Again, as Bill Sharp says, Three Horizons, it's as easy as 1, 3, 2. You go from the first horizon to the third horizon, and that opens up that space for the second. So you would start by asking, what are your concerns with the present system? What are your future aspirations? Viewed from here, what do you hope for? Once you've seen it, once you've imagined something, you start to be able to see it. Well, where's it happening already? That's box 3, the inspiring examples. What's giving you hope in the present that future is possible? Because I can see it here now. Those visionaries who are already embodying and enacting it. And then What are the innovations that you're seeing in that second horizon space? What are the promising innovations that are in play? Who's doing what that looks interesting? And then finally, and I don't always ask this question, but finally, that box 5, the enduring features. It's quite a reassuring question to ask. What are the features of the first horizon we don't want to lose in the transition? I talk about the baby we don't want to throw out with the bathwater. So you can convene a small group, have that conversation. It can take as little as an hour, and you discover a great deal about how that group is thinking about the future. Then you can go into the analysis, and we'll do that a bit later. Here's an example I prepared earlier. There we are, 3 horizons for winter care in Fife. That was back in 2009 and actually led to a number of transformative initiatives. There you see the 5 boxes. We have a kit, 3 horizons kit. This is the physical kit. There's also an online version, and that's a bunch of school children having a conversation, 3 horizons conversation about the future of their school. What are their concerns about the way it works at the moment? What do they dream of? What do they hope for? What are the changes that are in play? Exactly as I've described it. The kit includes 3 sets of cards. You can probably just discern them in the picture there. To introduce some relevant substance in the conversation. Again, it's possible to have a few conversations, generate some cards, and put those out around the entire organization to trigger this 3 horizons conversation more widely. So you can use the kit form triggered with these cards. Here's another I prepared earlier. This was work that we did, I guess it would be April through early June last year, across the NHS, actually, when nobody had any time, busy dealing with the pandemic. And we put out a survey. That's another way. Those 5 boxes, 4 or 5 boxes, you can just ask the questions. What are your concerns? What's not working? Actually, for this survey, people were so busy. We just said, what are you noticing as things flash by? What's not working? What's working? What's not working? What is working? What's giving you hope? What are the signs of hope? Where are the tensions arising, between the kind of short-term emergency care and longer-term conditions, the economy and health? All of those tensions were showing up. It's quite interesting. I'll just spend a little longer on this. So, what's not working? There's a whole pattern. This is the redacted version. None of this will come out until the public inquiry, but there, some pretty honest and brutal truths emerging there. What is working? Pattern of innovation. We got some innovation from Horizon 2. What's giving you hope? That was the question. This was just in the moment, not talking about the future at all. What are you noticing in the moment? Lots of hope and encouragement. My neighbor came around and gave me a meal. People are starting to think about, paying a living wage to carers. So some of that hope was about an aspirational future system. So we could put it in that top right-hand corner. So we got some sense of what people were aspiring to, or what was coming out in the conversations and in what people were noticing. Value tensions. What are the tensions that are showing up? Well, clearly, if we're going to move from one system to the other, we're going to have to navigate those tensions. And here, this is where we use dilemma thinking. Each of those are dilemmas. They're not choices. I keep saying, it's not a choice between stocking the food bank and generating a sustainable local food system. We have to do both. So there's emergency care and longer term transition. So all of those value tensions are of the quality of yes and there's a way when we come to processing the conversation that we can treat those as dilemmas, and it gives us, where's the resolution point? What are the things that would work in both worlds, the best of both worlds? And then finally, ask the question about what's missing. What are you noticing that's missing? What are you noticing that isn't there? Interesting things here. Those effectively become the enabling conditions for system transition. Valuing and supporting staff, wide, open, honest conversations, a broader view of health, the freedom to innovate, the energy to deliver, resources for the transition, time to think, all of those things. You see, so effectively, now these are people, busy people at the end of their shift, filling in a survey every so often for 5 minutes. And what they have produced, or what that has produced, viewed through the Three Horizons framework and those lenses, I think is a pretty solid strategy for health and social care coming through the pandemic. It's told us where we need to go, what the tensions are that we need to navigate, and what will enable that transition. So I think that's a pretty good return for 5 minutes of effort. We've done something similar with the questions that were asked at the beginning of the Public Service Pioneers session. They were not questions about Three Horizons, but I've taken some of the answers and processed them into the framework. So there were questions about what are the present concerns about public service pioneering and systems change. There were questions about, actually the question was, where are we heading? What are we heading towards? And that revealed both a set of ideas about the endpoint, the aspirational system. We want to get to one Welsh public service, power resting in communities, deliberative democracy. Those are endpoints. But a lot of the answers to that question were actually about fitted into that second horizon box, the innovation. They were about means rather than ends. Data, prevention, systems thinking, agility, cutting edge tech, innovation. These are means, they're not ends. And we did ask that question again, what's missing? What will enable the transition? So I'm gonna stop sharing there. I want to get into the question of what will support the practice of shifting the system from the first to the third horizon. There we go. I call this the practice of transformative innovation. So having established there's a system there's a system that we want to gently usher not out of existence, but out of its dominant position in order to make way for the new. I call that the practice of system transition. And it's about developing transformative innovation to make that transition. And essentially, I see these different aspects being part of that practice. One is what we've just been doing, seeing patterns, reading the landscape of change. So that's getting that Three Horizons map, and we've talked about different ways that we can do that with groups of people. The second is pathways. Okay, we've got the map. So what are the promising pathways that might get us through that territory, navigating those value tensions, working with the dilemmas that are going to show up, finding our way through that messy middle, knowing that none of this is certain and that life is emergent. And then what about the practice? How do we make the journey? How do we actually set out, follow those pathways? And that includes policy and finance having a role in there as enabling or not enabling the people who are trying to make that journey. And finally, people. We talk about the 21st century competencies. It might be tough getting through that messy middle. It's always easier, however painful, to stay with the existing system. Walter Brueggemann, the Old Testament scholar, wrote a great book called The Prophetic Imagination, which I read as a treatise on the Three Horizons. He said the roles of the prophet are threefold. Firstly, to critique the existing system. That's the first horizon. Secondly, to paint a picture of the promised land. That's the third. And finally, to maintain the energy of the people during the 40 years in the wilderness it's going to take to move from one to the other. So that's part of the nature of the challenge. It may be testing. Before the Public Service Pioneers program began, everyone was sent a welcome pack, which included a little postcard pointing to our practice center, a little permission slip there saying you have permission to make that journey. And by the way, here's the helpline should you run into difficulties. So I just wanted to flag that up. And now I want to try and do something risky, which is sketch, just add a bit more detail to this three horizons landscape, to show you a little bit more of what I see in it. So we've already talked about, let's see if this works. We've already talked about, the different types of innovation. So we've got sustaining innovation, and we've got transformative innovation. We've already talked about that. So the map gives you that distinction. It also gives you a sense of transition over time. Transition. So we don't have to do it all at once. This could take a generation, could take 5 years, could take 10 years. We can think in terms of transition. When I talk about policy, can we make policy for transition over time rather than it's all going to change tomorrow, or it's all going to change next April at the start of the next financial year. The other thing that we can start to see here, I just want to say a bit more about what I said right at the start. 3 perspectives on the future potential of the present moment. So, if we stand here, looking from the first horizon position, as I said, we're probably going to have a managerial perspective. We're going to be a manager. We're responsible for maintaining that pattern. And what we're looking for here, what we're judged on is efficiency. Have we met the budget, and reliability? That's what people expect from us. If we're down here, let's see. Don't worry about the color coding. If we're down here, the second horizon, from here, we're going to be an entrepreneur. We've got an entrepreneurial view. I can never spell this word. We've got an entrepreneurial view. We see opportunity, opportunity for introducing new stuff, and we're judged really on speed. Are we quick enough to take the advantage of the moment? I struggle to tell this story now without talking about PPE. There was a moment when everybody wanted PPE, and the entrepreneurs moved very quickly. Some of them moved faster than others to deliver that. They read the landscape. They said, right, there's an opportunity now, and some of them missed it. So opportunity and speed. If you're down here, this third perspective is a vision, as I say, a visionary perspective. Let's see if we can get a smaller visionary. Here's the visionary perspective. And here you're really talking about values and commitment. This is what's important to you. So you're living your values. The first horizon, for whatever reason, it's lost touch with that third horizon energy that it started with. It's become more bureaucratic, say. So the visionary is in touch with values and committed to them. I'm going to live this way. I'm going to be this way, whatever the first horizon tells me, even though it relegates me to the fringe. The other thing I wanted to say, so those are three positions, if you like. Now, these are not. We are not the first horizon person, the second horizon person, the third horizon person. We all contain all of these perspectives. We can stand in any of these places. Actually, they're all the same place, the present. We could see each of these views ourselves. And so, one of the things I want to emphasize is that when we talk about, this kind of joined up working and collaboration and involving others, could we involve more of ourselves? Could we involve, and as we have the conversations, can we make sure that all 3 perspectives are included? You'll find that there's a much greater resource in every conversation if you can hear these 3 perspectives and work with them. So as in the previous conversation, we said it's all about relationships. Well, it's also about the relationships between these three views. The managers are doing their best, and we need them to keep providing reliable services. We can't allow those services just to collapse. The entrepreneurs, okay, we can make fun of them, but look, they're introducing disruptive energy into the system. We need them. The visionaries, if we don't have a vision of the future, then we're going to get the one that results from the dialogue between the managers and the entrepreneurs, and the managers are essentially concerned, you know, what's their problem is scarcity. That is what they're trying to manage. And you know, the third horizon is about configuring abundance. So unless we get that third horizon voice into the conversation, it's going to be missing something. Now, I just want to also, as we're, you know, just exploring the framework a bit more, I want to take this notion of risk, because that came up in the first conversation as well. We're risk averse. Well, risk turns out differently in these different patterns, in these different horizons. Now, if you're the first horizon manager, the risk is of overwhelm. It's a reliable system. Actually, I haven't got enough. The demand is too much. You know, I've got a waiting list. People are getting irritated and annoyed that it's not available. So the risk, one risk is overwhelm. Another risk is making mistakes. It's a reliable system. It's got to be reliable. You can't make mistakes. That's not the nature of that. You're allowed to make mistakes as an entrepreneur. You're allowed to make mistakes as a visionary. You can be a visionary ahead of your time, but you can't make a mistake as a manager. That's the risk. So when we talk about risk aversion, or worry about risk taking, what are the risks? The risks in the first horizon are about overwhelm and mistakes. The risks for the entrepreneur actually are missing the boat, not being fast enough. Oh, missing the boat. Oh God, everybody else has got in on the PPE thing. I'm too late. And failure to learn. Failure to learn. Because, you know, if you miss the boat on the PPE, what's the next thing? If you've made a fortune on the PPE, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? You've got to be keeping reading the landscape. You mustn't get trapped as an entrepreneur. You've got to move on to the next thing. So what's the next thing? Keep scanning. So failure to learn is a risk there. Now, what about the visionary? What is the risk for the visionary? I think one of the risks for the visionary is loss of integrity. Loss of integrity. You know, you're about values and commitment. I'm going to be this way. The first horizon comes calling and says, well, you know, would you like to become the so-and-so SAR in our government and roll this out across the entire system? Of course, we'll have to package it into the right bureaucratic form. Are you going to say no? Or are you going to say, are you actually, in terms of managing the transition, are you going to say, actually, I've got a very good colleague who could do that for you, because we do need this. We do need this to permeate the first horizon. But to grow the third, we've got to maintain the integrity of this pattern. And that's what I'm standing for, and that's what I'm going to do. So loss of integrity is one challenge. The other is burnout. Those keystone individuals, you know, what happens to them? And this is teeing up the next discussion. There are two things that happen to these kind of visionary initiatives. One is that, as I say, you know, the first horizon comes calling and says, actually, that's great. We'll have some of that. That fixes, that makes more efficient and more reliable the system that is buckling under strain at the moment. We'll have some of that. There's some really good ideas that you're playing with there. So you get absorbed into the old pattern. The second is burnout. You know, it's a very successful project, but it never finds the other support and the pattern of activity around it that it needs. And so, you know, the people run out of money, the people run out of energy. They're working against the grain. They're working uphill, whatever metaphor you need. And eventually they can't go on any longer and they fail. And that's what I want to talk about now is, so somewhere in here, I have this notion of, you know, a bit of scaffolding, some set of supports. Oh my God, That's that's not good. There we go. Some scaffolding or capacity development, talking about the people. So what do we need to put in place? What's the infrastructure we need to put in place that will give this visionary third horizon pattern and these projects a chance to realize their potential, to reach a flourishing third horizon? What might sit in this box here? What's the kind of support that's needed to encourage both the growth of the visionary projects, but also, you know, the management of the relationship between these three perspectives? We need some entrepreneurial energy to help the third. We need that transformative innovation to help the third horizon come into being. But eventually, we are also going to need the investment, you know, the transfer of resources from the first horizon into the growing third, you know, an admission by the first horizon managers that actually there's something here that can be reliable and can be efficient, and that will meet the demands of the people that we serve. So that's my question for the next session, and Alexis will guide us into that. What kind of scaffolding do we need in there? What kind of supports do we need to put in place to enable system transition with this three horizons perspective?